Welcome to Section 1.1. This is the first session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. In this session, we'll cover the foundations of security. We'll answer 6 questions. Why does security exist at all? How is security different from information technology? How do you get started, then improve? How do you test whether your defenses hold? How do you keep security affordable and legally sound? And why is security never truly finished? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because security is what keeps a business alive. Picture a hospital, an online bank, and a small software startup. Each one depends on its data and systems to survive, get security right, and the organization keeps running through attacks and outages. Get it wrong, and a single breach can end it. As a professional, you are the person who makes that difference. So why does security exist in the first place? It exists to keep the organization operating. Attackers try to steal data. They try to damage your physical and logical systems. Security is what lets the business continue anyway. And here is the key framing for the exam. Security is a business management concern, not just a technical one. It exists to support the mission, the goals, and the objectives of the whole organization. How is security different from information technology? This distinction matters on the exam. Information technology is the hardware and software that runs the business. Think of it as the engine. Security is the management discipline that keeps that engine reliable and protected. Think of it as the brakes and the safety checks. One makes the car move, the other makes it safe to drive. How do you actually get started with security? You begin with a security framework. A framework is a proven starting point. It saves you from inventing controls from scratch. But adopting a framework is only the beginning. You fine-tune your security through continuous evaluation and stress testing. Think of it like training for fitness. You start with a plan, then adjust as you measure real results. How do you test whether your defenses actually hold? You use 3 kinds of evaluation. First is a risk assessment. You identify your assets, the threats against them, and your vulnerabilities. Together, these let you calculate risk. Second is a vulnerability assessment. Here you use automated tools to find known weaknesses. Then you patch them or add defenses. Third is penetration testing. A trusted team actively stress tests your defenses. They find the gaps before a real attacker does. Picture a bank vault. The risk assessment lists what could go wrong. The vulnerability scan checks for unlocked doors. The penetration test hires someone to try breaking in. Why does security have to be cost-effective? Because no organization has an unlimited budget. Security competes for funding with every other part of the business. So you choose controls that give the most protection for the lowest cost. You spend where the risk is highest. A $1,000 lock on a $10 item makes no sense. Match the defense to the value it protects. Why does security also need to be legally defensible? Because the law is your final backstop. When someone breaks into your environment, prosecution may be your only path to closure. And many of your own decisions carry legal liability. If you ever defend a security action in court, well-supported choices protect you. They shield the organization from fines, penalties, and charges of negligence. Why is security never truly finished? Because it is a journey, not a finish line. You can never fully secure anything, because the ground keeps shifting. Your technology changes, your users change, and attackers keep finding new flaws. The defense that was strong yesterday may fail tomorrow. So as new vulnerabilities and exploits appear, you reassess and respond. Security is a habit, not a project with an end date. So let's bring it together. Security exists to keep the organization operating. It is a business concern, not just a technical one. You start with a framework, then test with risk assessments, vulnerability scans, and penetration tests. You keep it cost-effective and legally defensible, and you treat it as a journey that never ends. Master these foundations, and the rest of the series will build cleanly on top. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to Section 1.2, Part 1. This is the second session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. In this session, we'll build the foundation under every security decision. We'll answer several questions. What are the core goals that security protects? What does each goal really mean in practice? What happens when those protections fail? Can you have too much security? And what extra properties round out a complete model? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because these ideas sit underneath every control you will ever design. Picture an airline booking system, a payroll database, and a hospital patient portal. Each one lives or dies by the same handful of properties. When you can name what you are protecting, you defend it deliberately. When you cannot, you are only guessing. So what are the core goals of security? 3 properties form the heart of the field: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Together they are so central they earn their own name, the core triad. Most controls you meet are really serving one of these 3, and most risks are measured by the harm they do to them. Keep this trio in mind as your scorecard for every defense. What does confidentiality actually protect? It protects secrecy. Confidentiality keeps data away from anyone not cleared to see it. But it is not only about stopping deliberate attackers. Most leaks come from plain human error, a misdirected email or a sloppy setting. You enforce it with encryption, strict access control, strong authentication, and training. Think of a sealed medical file. Only the treating doctor gets to open it. What does integrity protect? It protects the accuracy and trustworthiness of data. Integrity stops information from being changed without permission. That covers outside tampering, honest insider mistakes, and quiet corruption over time. You defend it with access control, hashing, input checks, and intrusion detection. Picture a bank ledger. Every entry must stay exactly as recorded, or the account becomes meaningless. What does availability protect? It protects timely access for the people who are allowed in. A system can be perfectly secret and perfectly accurate, yet useless if nobody can reach it. Threats include hardware failure, power loss, and denial of service attacks that flood a system offline. You protect it with redundancy, tested backups, and no single point of failure. A hospital record must open the instant a nurse needs it. What happens when these protections fail? Flip each goal and you get its failure. Disclosure is confidentiality breaking, secrets getting out. Alteration is integrity breaking, data changed without approval. Destruction is availability breaking, a resource wrecked or taken offline. Learning these failures gives you a fast diagnostic. When something goes wrong, name which property just fell. Can you have too much security? Yes, and it is a real trap. Lock confidentiality down too hard, and authorized users cannot get their work done. Over-tighten integrity, and the same restriction hits availability. Swing too far toward open availability, and secrecy and accuracy start to leak. Security is a balance, not a dial you crank to maximum. Match the protection to what the asset is worth. What is authenticity? It is the assurance that data really came from its claimed source. It sits close to integrity, but the focus is origin, not only accuracy. When a message has authenticity, the receiver trusts both who sent it and that it arrived unchanged. Think of a signed contract. The signature ties the document to a specific, verified author. What is non-repudiation? It means someone cannot deny an action they actually took. It stops a user from claiming they never sent that message or approved that transfer. You build it from identification, authentication, and careful logging. Digital signatures and transaction records make it hold. Without it, accountability collapses, because anyone can simply say it was not me. What ties identity to accountability? A foundational set of access services. On the surface, it is authentication, authorization, and accounting, but it really unfolds into 5 steps. Identification, you claim who you are. Authentication, you prove it. Authorization, the system decides what you may touch. Auditing, it records what you do. Accounting, someone reviews those records to hold you responsible. Drop any one, and the chain of accountability breaks. So let's bring it together. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability are the three goals you always protect. Their failures are disclosure, alteration, and destruction. Too much of any one starves the others, so you balance. Authenticity proves origin, and non-repudiation makes actions undeniable. Access services, from identification through accounting, tie every identity to accountability. Master these, and every later control has a home. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to Section 1.2, Part 2. This is the third session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. This part picks up where the last one left off, moving from the goals of security to the machinery that enforces them. In this session, we'll unpack the mechanics behind access and control. We'll answer several questions. How does the system know who you are? How does it prove that claim? How does it decide what you can touch? How does it record what you did and hold you responsible? And what design tricks make controls stronger and simpler? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because these steps run silently every time anyone signs in. Picture a courier logging into a warehouse app to scan a package. The moment they tap their badge, 5 things happen in sequence, and every one has to hold. If any single link is weak, you cannot trust the record of who moved what. On the job, this chain is the difference between a solid investigation and a shrug. How does a system first know who you are? Through identification. Identification is simply claiming an identity, nothing more. You might type a username, tap a smart card, wave a proximity fob, or present your face to a scanner. The system needs this label so it can attach everything that follows to one account. Think of signing your name at a front desk. You have announced who you are, but you have not yet proven it. How does the system prove that claim is real? Through authentication. Authentication is the test that verifies the identity you just claimed. You supply something extra that only the real account holder should have, most commonly a password. The system compares that factor against its record and either accepts or rejects it. Weak factors mean weak trust, and passwords alone are the easiest to defeat. Picture the front desk asking for a photo badge before letting you through the gate. How does the system decide what you are allowed to touch? Through authorization. Once you are authenticated, authorization sets the boundaries of what you can do. Being known and being trusted does not mean you can reach everything. You might read a report but not delete it, or open an app but see none of its data. It is not all or nothing like the first 2 steps. It flexes per resource. Think of a hotel keycard that opens your room and the gym, but not the manager's office. How does the system record what you actually did? Through auditing. Auditing is the programmatic recording of a subject's actions into logs. Those logs become an audit trail you can replay to reconstruct an intrusion, a failure, or a fraud. It also surfaces abnormal activity that should not be happening. One clarification that trips people up. Monitoring is the act of watching, while auditing is writing that activity into a durable record. You can watch without recording, but you cannot audit without watching first. Picture a store's cameras feeding a recorder that keeps the footage. How does the system hold someone responsible? Through accounting. Accounting is where accountability finally lands, reviewing the records to tie actions back to a real person. It leans on every earlier step, because a name in a log only matters if the login behind it was truly that person. This is why strong authentication is so important. If all you had was a guessable password, a court could reasonably doubt who was at the keyboard. Combine several factors, and that doubt nearly disappears. Think of a signed delivery slip backed by a photo and a timestamp. Now, what design tricks make controls stronger and simpler? A handful of protection mechanisms sit under many controls. The big 4 are defense in depth, abstraction, data hiding, and encryption. You will not build every control from these, but you will meet them constantly. Think of them as the reusable building blocks behind good security design. Keep them in mind as we walk through each one. What is defense in depth? It is layering multiple controls in a series, one after another. No single control stops every threat, so you stack several so a failure in one does not expose everything behind it. The order matters. In a series, every attack must pass through each layer in turn, so each one gets a chance to catch it. Parallel checkpoints are wide but shallow, and a threat can slip through the one gate that ignores it. A related idea is diversity of defense, using products from different vendors so one shared floor cannot topple several layers at once. Picture a castle with a moat, a wall, and a locked keep, each guarding the next. What is abstraction? It is grouping similar things so you can secure them together. Instead of assigning rights to each user or object one at a time, you sort them into roles or classes and apply controls to the whole group. Add a new hire to the finance role, and they inherit every permission that role already carries. This is the same idea that powers object-oriented programming, where you use something through a clean interface without knowing its inner workings. Think of assigning a department badge color, and every door reads the color instead of memorizing each face. What is data hiding? It is deliberately placing data where a subject cannot see it or reach it. This is stronger than merely keeping something out of sight. The subject is genuinely blocked from the compartment. It might keep a low-clearance user away from higher classified files, or stop an application from poking directly at hardware. Do not confuse it with security through obscurity, which just hopes nobody stumbles onto an unprotected secret. Obscurity is digital hide and seek with no real lock. Data hiding is a real lock. Think of storing sensitive files in a vault that certain staff cannot even open. What is encryption? It is scrambling the meaning of a communication so unintended recipients cannot read it. It applies across every kind of electronic message and stored file, turning readable content into something useless to anyone without the key. It is the workhorse behind confidentiality in transit and at rest. Think of writing in a private code that only the intended reader can decode. So let's bring it together. Identification claims who you are, and authentication proves it. Authorization decides what you may touch. Auditing records what you did. And accounting holds you responsible for it. Underneath the controls sit 4 reusable mechanisms. Defense in depth layers your protection. Abstraction groups things for efficient control. Data hiding locks data out of reach. And encryption scrambles meaning from prying eyes. Master this chain and these building blocks, and every control you meet later will slot right in. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to Section 1.3. This is the 4th session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. In this session, we'll map the invisible lines that shape your defenses. We'll answer several questions. What exactly is a security boundary? What different forms do these boundaries take? Why must every boundary be clearly defined? And how do you decide what protection each one deserves? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because you cannot guard a line you have not drawn. Picture a design firm sharing one open floor with a payment processing team. Same building, but wildly different sensitivity of data. If nobody marks where the strict zone begins, people wander across it without a second thought. Spot the boundaries first, and you know precisely where to place your controls. What exactly is a security boundary? It is the line where 2 areas with different security needs meet. On one side sits something more sensitive, on the other something less. A classic example is the seam between your internal network and the public internet. The instant you recognize that line, you gain a job to do, controlling how information crosses it. Think of a shoreline where calm harbour water meets open sea. The two are clearly not the same, and the harbour wall marks where one ends. What different forms do these boundaries take? They show up in several shapes. One form is between data classifications, where each level defines who may act on which objects, so the gap between levels is itself a boundary. Another form sits between the physical world and the logical world. Guarding a locked server room is a different job from guarding the accounts running on those servers. Both must exist and both belong in your policy, but you assess each on its own terms. Think of a bank needing both a vault door and a login screen. Neither one replaces the other. Why must every boundary be clearly defined? Because a fuzzy line cannot be enforced. Your policy should state exactly where your control begins and ends, in both the physical and logical worlds. In the logical world, that is where your systems meet outside traffic your organization is legally responsible for. That edge is usually marked plainly, warning outsiders that they have no access and that trying anyway invites prosecution. In the physical world, warning signs post the same message at the fence or the door. Think of a clearly painted line on a factory floor. Everyone can see exactly where the restricted zone starts. How do you decide what protection each boundary deserves? You weigh the controls against the value of what sits behind them. Handle each environment and each boundary separately. Then pick the most reasonable and cost-effective mechanism for that specific spot. The guiding rule never changes. A countermeasure should not cost more than the asset it protects. Spending heavily to guard something cheap is simply waste. Think of fitting a modest lock on a supply closet, but a serious vault on the room full of customer records. Match the strength of the barrier to the worth of what is inside. So let's bring it together. A security boundary is the line between areas with different security needs. Those boundaries appear between classifications and between the physical and logical worlds, and each must be assessed on its own. Every boundary has to be defined clearly in policy in both realms so it can actually be enforced. And the protection you place on each one should match the value of what it guards, never costing more than the asset itself. Draw your lines well, and every control you add later has a clear home. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to section 1.4. This is the 5th session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. In this session, we'll look at who steers security and how they prove it works. We'll answer several questions. What is security governance and who owns it? How does it connect to the rest of the business? Why is security not just an IT concern? What frameworks help you structure it? What is third-party governance? And what role does documentation review play? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because governance is what keeps security honest over time. Picture a growing retailer whose board asks a simple question every quarter. Are we actually safer than last quarter? And can we prove it? Without governance, security drifts into a pile of tools nobody reviews. With it, someone senior is accountable for direction, and outside auditors can confirm you are meeting your obligations. On the job, this is the layer that turns effort into assurance. What is security governance, and who owns it? It is the set of practices that support, define, direct, and evaluate an organization's security efforts. Ideally, a board or a governance committee runs it, drawing on people from different industries and backgrounds. In smaller shops, a chief executive or a chief information security officer may carry the load. The point is that governance compares your internal practices against outside knowledge and steers improvement from the top. Think of a ship's bridge crew, setting the course and checking it against the charts, not just steering blindly. How does governance connect to the rest of the business? Tightly, because it is woven into corporate and IT governance. All three pursue overlapping goals, like keeping the business running while pushing toward growth and resilience. Some governance duties are forced on you by law and regulation, others by industry rules or license terms. Every form of it, including security governance, has to be checked and validated periodically. This gets genuinely tricky when the laws of different countries disagree or even conflict. Think of 3 managers sharing one calendar. Their commitments overlap constantly, so they have to coordinate rather than work in isolation. Why is security not just an IT concern? Because it touches every part of the organization, not only the server room. Governance is really a management method fused with a security solution, reaching into every level of the business. The very phrase security governance exists to hammer this home. Security is a business operations issue, something the whole organization owns, not a task the technical team quietly handles in the background. Think of workplace safety. It is not the janitor's private problem. Everyone, from the boardroom to the loading dock, shares it. What frameworks help you structure all this? Establish frameworks and guidelines so you are not inventing governance from scratch. Public standards bodies publish structured guidance you can adopt and adapt to your own environment. As artificial intelligence and large language models spread, that guidance now extends to AI-specific governance, with dedicated risk frameworks for mapping, measuring, and managing the risks of building and deploying AI systems. There is even an international standard for an artificial intelligence management system, folding concerns like fairness, transparency, and accountability into normal operations. Much of this material was written with government and military use in mind, yet other organizations can borrow it freely. Think of a recipe book. You did not write the recipes, but you tailor each one to your own kitchen. What is third-party governance? It is external oversight of security, and it works in two directions. In one direction, an outside investigator or auditor examines you, mandated by law, regulation, industry standards, contracts, or licensing. In the other direction, you extend your own oversight onto the outside parties you depend on. Any vendor handling your guards, your maintenance, your support, or your accounting must meet your security stance, or they become a fresh source of risk. Good third-party governance leans on full and open document exchange, so both sides agree on every requirement and no one gets surprised. Think of hiring a subcontractor for a build. You check their license, and they check yours before anyone pours concrete. What role does documentation review play? It is the step where exchange materials are read and checked against your standards and expectations. It usually happens before anyone shows up for an on-site inspection. If the paperwork is complete and solid, the on-site visit can simply confirm that reality matches the documents. If the paperwork is thin or wrong, the visit is postponed until it is fixed, because messy documentation usually signals a messy operation underneath. In government and military settings, failing this review can cost you your authorization to operate, and winning it back demands complete documents plus a full on-site check. Think of a pilot's pre-flight checklist. If the logbook does not add up, the plane simply does not leave the gate. So let's bring it together. Security governance is the practice of directing, defining, and evaluating security, ideally owned by a board and steered from the top. It is fused with corporate and IT governance and shaped by laws that sometimes conflict. Security is a whole business issue, not an IT-only chore. Frameworks give you structure, now including guidance for AI systems. Third-party governance runs both ways. Auditors checking you and you checking your vendors, and documentation review is the paperwork gate that can make or break an authorization to operate. Get governance right, and everything else you build has real oversight. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to Section 1.5, Part 1. This is the 6th session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. In this session, we'll cover how you actually run and steer the security effort. We'll answer several questions. What does managing the security function mean? Why must security be measurable? How do you tie security to the business? Who leads it and how? What kinds of plans do you build? What organizational processes deserve extra scrutiny? And who fills the key security roles? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because someone has to own security as an ongoing program, not a one-off project. Picture a mid-sized logistics company that just acquired a smaller rival. Suddenly there are new systems, new staff, and new risks flooding in overnight. Without a managed security function, nobody is measuring, planning, or assigning responsibility, and gaps open fast. With it, every change runs through a clear structure. On the job, this is how security keeps pace with a moving business. What does managing the security function actually mean? It means treating security as a business activity you evaluate and improve over time. The clearest example is running a risk assessment and using it to shape your security policy. To pull this off, you need proper governance underneath. This is where development and rollout of your information security strategy lives. Think of it as tending a garden rather than planting once and walking away. It needs steady attention to keep producing. Why must security be measurable? Because you cannot improve what you cannot see. Measurable security means each mechanism does its job, delivers a clear benefit, and produces metrics you can record and analyze. When you deploy a safeguard, the numbers should show fewer bad events or more caught attempts. Measuring and evaluating those metrics is how you judge whether the whole program is complete and effective, including against common guidelines. Think of a fitness tracker. Without the readings, you are only guessing whether the workout is working. How do you tie security to the business? Through security management planning that aligns the security function to the organization's strategy, goals, mission, and objectives. That planning respects real limits like budgets and scarce resources, so you aim for the greatest benefit from every effort. A common tool here is the business case, a documented argument that justifies a decision or a new project, especially a security one. Money, people, technology, and space are all finite, so you must earn each investment. Think of pitching a home renovation to your family. You show the need, the cost, and the payoff before anyone spends. Who leads security and how? Senior management leads it using a top-down approach. Upper management sets the policies that give direction to the whole hierarchy. Middle management turns those policies into standards, baselines, guidelines, and procedures. Operational staff then implement the prescribed configurations and end users comply. The opposite, a bottom-up approach where technical staff decide security alone without leadership input, is rare and considered a problem. Security is a business responsibility, not just an IT one. Think of an orchestra. The conductor sets the piece, and every section plays their part in time. How should the security team be positioned? It should be autonomous, led by a Chief Information Security Officer who reports straight to senior leadership. That direct line, whether to the Chief Information Officer, the Chief Executive, or the board, keeps security out of departmental politics and strengthens it across the whole organization. Approval from the top is the one factor no plan can survive without. A policy the leadership does not back and commit to will simply fail. Building and enforcing that policy is also evidence of due diligence and due care, which shields management from claims of negligence when a loss occurs. Think of a referee who answers to the league, not to either team on the field. What kinds of plans do you build? Security management rests on 3 plan types working together. They differ in how far ahead they look and how much detail they carry. A strategic plan sets the long view, a tactical plan fills in the middle, and an operational plan governs the here and now. Think of planning a road trip. You pick the destination, then the route, then the turn-by-turn directions. Let's walk through each. What is a strategic plan? It is the long-term, fairly stable plan that defines your security purpose. It aligns the security function with the organization's goals, mission, and objectives, and it sets your planning horizon. Because it looks far ahead, you revisit and update it regularly rather than rewriting it constantly, and it should include a risk assessment. Think of a compass heading for a long voyage. It rarely changes, but it keeps everything else pointed the right way. What is a tactical plan? It is the mid-term plan that adds detail on how to reach the goals the strategic plan set out. It can also be built on the fly in response to events you did not see coming. It typically schedules the concrete tasks needed to hit organizational goals. Examples include project plans, hiring plans, budget plans, and system development plans. Think of a season schedule for a team. It maps out the matches that move you toward the championship. What is an operational plan? It is the short-term, highly detailed plan drawn from the strategic and tactical ones. It stays valid only briefly, so you refresh it often to keep it in step with the tactical plan. It spells out exactly how goals get done, with resource allotments, budgets, staffing, scheduling, and step-by-step procedures. Training plans and deployment plans are typical examples. Think of a daily to-do list. It changes constantly, but it is where the real work actually happens. What organizational processes deserve extra scrutiny? Anything that shakes up the organization raises risk, so governance has to cover it. Mergers and acquisitions bring danger, from leaked information and data loss to downtime and poor return. Buy without security in mind, and the flaws in what you acquired ride along for the product's whole life. So weigh the total cost of ownership, not just the sticker price. Divestitures and layoffs are risky too. Sanitize and destroy storage media, since wiping does not guarantee data cannot be recovered, and debrief departing staff with an exit interview covering their remaining agreements. Acquisition also covers outsourcing and consultants, so vet any third party you engage. Think of merging two households. You inventory everything and change the locks before you settle in. Who fills the key security roles? A handful of standard roles divide responsibility and liability across the environment. The senior manager owns overall security, signs off on policy, and is ultimately held liable, though they delegate the hands-on work. The security professional writes and implements the policy but does not make the decisions. The asset owner classifies information for protection, then hands the day-to-day data work to a custodian who performs the actual protections like backups and integrity checks. The user gets only the access their job needs, following the principle of least privilege, and the auditor reviews whether the policy is properly implemented and reports back to the senior manager. Think of a construction site. An owner, an architect, a foreman, the crew, and a building inspector each hold a distinct, named responsibility. So let's bring it together. Managing the security function means running security as a measurable, ongoing program tied to the business through planning and business cases. Leadership drives it top-down, with an autonomous Chief Information Security Officer reporting to the top and senior approval making or breaking every policy. You build 3 plans: strategic for the long view, tactical for the middle, and operational for the here and now. Mergers, divestitures, and outsourcing demand extra scrutiny, and 6 clear roles, from senior manager to auditor. Split the responsibility, get this structure in place, and security scales with the organization. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to Section 1.5, Part 2. This is the 7th session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. This part continues the security function, turning to the frameworks that give it structure. In this session, we'll survey the frameworks you build security on and the diligence that backs them. We'll answer several questions. What is a security control framework? Then we'll walk through the major ones you should recognize. And finally, what do due diligence and due care really mean? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because you rarely design security from a blank page. Picture a payment startup that must satisfy card industry rules, reassure enterprise buyers, and win a government contract, all at once. Each of those goals maps to a named framework the buyer already trusts. Knowing which framework fits which need saves months of wheel reinventing. On the job, fluency in these names is often the fastest path to a yes. What is a security control framework? It is a structured set of guidelines, standards, best practices, and controls that helps an organization manage and strengthen its security posture. Rather than inventing controls yourself, you adopt a proven structure for identifying, implementing, and monitoring them across your data, systems, and networks. Several organizations publish and maintain these frameworks, each with its own focus. Think of choosing a blueprint for a house instead of drawing every wall from memory. The structure is already sound. Let's look at the major ones. What is the ISO/IEC family of security standards? It comes from the International Organization for Standardization, working alongside the International Electrotechnical Commission. These are worldwide standards drawn up by representatives from national standards bodies, covering equipment, software, protocols, and management. The security-focused 27,000 family gives you a broad basis for building organizational security, and it's supporting management practices. These standards are widely accepted across industries, and some governments have even adopted them as requirements. Think of an international power plug standard. Agree on it once, and everyone's device is fit. What does NIST bring to the table? NIST is a US federal agency under the Department of Commerce focused on measurement standards and advancing technology. Among its best-known work is a special publication laying out a comprehensive set of security and privacy controls for information systems, widely used as a reference well beyond government. NIST also produced a risk management framework and a cybersecurity framework, both of which we explore later in the series. Think of a National Bureau of Weights and Measures. Everyone calibrates against the same trusted reference. What is COBIT, and who is it for? COBIT is a documented set of IT security best practices from the professional body ISACA. It lays out goals and requirements for controls and pushes you to map security ideals directly onto business objectives. It rests on a handful of principles for governing and managing enterprise technology, from delivering stakeholder value to keeping governance distinct from management. Auditors lean on it heavily as a guideline. Think of a scoring rubric a teacher and a student both use. Everyone knows what good looks like. What is SABSA built for? SABSA is a risk-driven approach to building enterprise security architecture that stays tied to the business. Its whole personality is holistic and enterprise-minded. It puts risk first, aligning your defenses with your specific business risks and objectives, and it insists that security be woven into business processes rather than bolted on. It uses a layered model, from strategic planning down to operational controls, and even offers its own certification. Think of a master architect who designs the building around how people will actually live and work in it. What problem does PCI DSS solve? PCI DSS is a set of security requirements built by the major card brands to protect credit and debit card data. It covers secure handling of cardholder data, strong network security, tight access on a need-to-know basis, continuous monitoring and testing, and clear incident response. Any entity that processes card transactions must comply, and failure can bring fines, lost processing privileges, and reputational damage. Compliance is confirmed through regular audits by qualified assessors. Think of the strict handling rules for cash in transit. Everyone touching the money follows the same lockdown routine. What is FedRAMP for? FedRAMP is a US government-wide program that standardizes how cloud services are assessed, authorized, and continuously monitored for federal use. Cloud providers must meet a defined set of controls, pass a rigorous third-party assessment, and keep monitoring after authorization. It even lets agencies reuse one provider's authorization instead of each repeating the work, and it sorts systems into impact levels by sensitivity. Think of a single safety certification a product earns once, then every store trusts without retesting it. What does ITIL contribute? ITIL is a set of recommended best practices, originally from the British government, for optimizing IT services to support business growth and change. Its focus is squarely on integrating and aligning technology and security with what the organization is actually trying to achieve. Teams often use it as a starting point when crafting a customized security solution inside an existing infrastructure. Think of a proven playbook a new coach adapts to their own team rather than starting from scratch. What do due diligence and due care really mean? They are the twin habits that prove you took security seriously. Due diligence is understanding what needs to happen and laying the groundwork for it, building the formal structure of policy, standards, baselines, guidelines, and procedures. Due care is carrying out the correct steps when they are called for, actually applying that structure day after day. One is planning, the other is discipline practice, and together they let you disprove negligence when a loss occurs. Diligence also works as ongoing oversight, confirming the right actions are being taken and recorded, and adjusting the plans as threats change. Think of a lifeguard. Writing the safety rules and studying the water is diligence. Watching the swimmers and reacting is care. So let's bring it together. A security control framework hands you a proven structure instead of a blank page. The major ones each have a lane. The ISO, IEC, 27000 family, and NIST publications set broad control baselines. COBIT and SABSA drive governance and architecture. PCI DSS guards card data. FedRAMP governs federal cloud. and ITIL aligns IT services to the business. Underpinning all of it, due diligence is planning what should be done, and due care is doing it, day in and day out. Know the frameworks and live the diligence, and your security has both a shape and a spine. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to section 1.6. This is the 8th session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. In this session, we'll build the paperwork backbone of a security program. We'll answer several questions. Why formalize security into a hierarchy of documents? What is a security policy and what types exist? What are standards and baselines? What are guidelines and how do they differ? What are procedures and why keep all these documents separate? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because vague intentions do not survive an audit or an incident. Picture a fast-growing software firm where every team secures things their own way, with nothing written down. When a breach hits, nobody can point to a single agreed rule, and blame scatters everywhere. A clear document hierarchy gives everyone the same reference. On the job, this structure is what turns good intentions into consistent, enforceable practice. Why formalize security into a hierarchy of documents? Because a layered structure reduces the chance of a security failure. Written policies, standards, procedures, and guidelines together produce a solid, reliable security foundation. Each layer serves a different level of detail, from broad direction at the top to precise steps at the bottom. Think of a company handbook. The mission statement sets the tone, while the detailed how-to pages tell you exactly what to click. Both are needed, and they nest inside each other. What is a security policy, and what types exist? A security policy sits at the top of the hierarchy. It defines the scope of security you need, names the assets that require protection, and states how far your defenses should go. It assigns responsibilities, defines roles, sets audit and compliance requirements, and declares acceptable risk. Policies are compulsory and serve as proof that leadership exercised due diligence. They come in 3 flavors. An organizational policy spans the whole enterprise. An issue-specific policy targets one service or function, and a system-specific policy governs a particular system, prescribing approved hardware, software, and controls. Think of a constitution with a few focused amendments, one broad charter, plus targeted rules for special cases. What are standards and baselines? Once the policies are set, standards flow from them. A standard defines compulsory requirements for the uniform use of hardware, software, technology, and controls, so everyone implements things the same way. A baseline is a more operationally focused form of standard. It sets the minimum level of security every system must meet. Anything falling below the baseline should be pulled from production until it is brought back up. The baseline is the common secure floor on which you stack stronger measures. Think of a building code. Every structure must meet the minimum before anyone adds premium features. What are guidelines? And how do they differ? Guidelines are the flexible layer. A guideline offers recommendations on how standards and baselines get implemented, serving as a practical guide for professionals and users alike. The key difference is that guidelines are not compulsory. They suggest actions and methodologies rather than mandating a specific product or exact configuration. Because they bend, you can tailor them to each unique system or situation, and they help shape new procedures. Think of a recommended packing list for a trip. Helpful advice you adapt, not a rule you must obey to the letter. What are procedures? Procedures are the most detailed layer at the bottom of the structure. A procedure, also called a standard operating procedure, is a step-by-step how-to document describing the exact actions needed to implement a specific control or solution. It might cover an entire deployment or focus on a single product. Because systems evolve, procedures must be updated as hardware and software change. Their whole purpose is consistent, repeatable results through standardization. Think of a recipe. Follow the same steps, and you get the same dish every time. Why keep all these documents separate? Because separation makes them easier to manage and safer to share. Not everyone needs to see every standard, baseline, guideline, and procedure for every classification level. So splitting them limits exposure, and when something changes, you update and redistribute only the affected piece, instead of reissuing one giant monolithic document to the whole organization. Think of a loose leaf binder. You swap out a single page instead of reprinting the entire book. So let's bring it together. Security formalization is a hierarchy of documents that turns intent into reliable practice. The compulsory policy sits at the top, coming in organizational, issue-specific, and system-specific forms. Standards mandate uniform use, baselines set the minimum secure floor, and guidelines offer flexible, optional advice. Procedures give the exact step-by-step actions. Keeping the documents separate limits exposure and makes updates painless. Build this backbone well, and your security becomes directed, efficient, and enforceable. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to Section 1.7. This is the 9th session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. In this session, we'll learn how to find and rank threats before they hurt you. We'll answer several questions. What is threat modeling? When do you do it? Proactively or reactively? How do you identify threats? How does the STRIDE model categorize them? How do you diagram and decompose a system? And how do you prioritize what you find? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because building blind almost guarantees expensive surprises. Picture a team shipping a new mobile wallet with no thought to how it might be attacked. Months later, they are patching frantically while users lose trust. Model the threats up front, and you design defenses in from the start, far cheaper than bolting them on later. On the job, this is how you turn security from firefighting into engineering. What is threat modeling? It is the process of identifying, categorizing, and analyzing potential threats. For each one, you work out the possible harm, the odds it happens, how much you should worry, and how to remove or reduce it. It is not a one-time event. You start it early in design and keep it running across the whole life cycle. Mature software teams fold it into their development life cycle to catch flaws sooner and cheaper. Think of a building inspector who checks the plans, the construction, and the finished structure, not just one snapshot. When do you model threats? Proactively or reactively? Both, and the distinction matters. The proactive, defensive approach happens early, during design and specification, predicting threats and baking in defenses as you build. Integrated security is usually cheaper and more effective than security shoehorned in later. The reactive, adversarial approach happens after a product exists, hunting for problems you could not foresee. This is where threat hunting lives, searching for evidence of compromise once warning signs appear. It powers ethical hacking, penetration testing, source code review, and fuzz testing, which floods software with strange inputs to find hidden flaws. Think of designing a car with crumple zones versus crash testing one already built. You want both. How do you identify threats in the first place? You use a structured approach because the possibilities are nearly endless. 3 common lenses help. Focused on assets, you start from what is valuable and ask what threatens it. Focused on attackers, you profile likely adversaries and reason from their motives and tactics. Focused on software, if you build software, you consider the threats against it directly. Pairing threats with vulnerabilities reveals the ones that truly put assets at risk, which is the whole point, to prioritize. Think of protecting a home by studying your valuables, your likely burglars, and your weak doors and windows, all 3. How does the STRIDE model categorize threats? STRIDE is a scheme that sorts threats into 6 named types, so you do not miss a category. Spoofing is faking an identity to slip past controls. Tampering is unauthorized changes to data in transit or at rest. Repudiation is denying an action you actually took, sometimes framing an innocent party. Information disclosure is leaking private or controlled data. Denial of service is blocking legitimate use of a resource. And elevation of privilege is turning a limited account into a powerful one. Modern modeling adds concerns for AI systems too, like biased algorithms that produce unfair outcomes. Think of a checklist of the 6 ways a con artist might work a room, so none surprises you. Are there fuller methodologies beyond Stride? Yes, several structured ones exist. One is a 7-stage, risk-centric method that walks from defining objectives through scoping and decomposing the application into threat and vulnerability analysis, attack simulation, and finally risk management, choosing countermeasures based on what your assets are worth. Another is a visual, agile approach that folds threat and risk management into agile development at scale. These are just 2 of many available from community groups, vendors, and government bodies. Think of choosing a recognized project methodology. You pick the one that fits how your team already works. How do you diagram the potential attacks? You draw the system to see where the danger lives. Map each major component, the boundaries between security zones, and how data flows and moves between them. Then identify every technology involved and, for each element on the diagram, the attacks that could target it. Consider all forms, technical, physical, and social, not just the obvious code-level ones. Complex systems may need several diagrams at different levels of detail. Think of sketching a floor plan and marking every door, window, and hallway a burglar might use. How do you decompose a system in reduction analysis? Reduction analysis means breaking the system into smaller parts to understand its logic and interactions. You split an application, system, or environment into modules, protocols, or even departments. Then study each part's inputs, processing, storage, and outputs. As you decompose, you pin down 5 key things. Trust boundaries, where the level of trust changes. Data flow paths, how data travels. Input points, where external data arrives. Privileged operations, actions needing elevated rights. And the stated security stance, your assumptions and policy. The better you understand the pieces, the easier the threats are to spot, and each one should be documented by its means, target, and consequences. Think of taking apart an engine to see exactly where it could fail. How do you prioritize the threats you find? You rank them so the worst get attention first. One simple method multiplies probability by damage potential, scoring each threat toward a top severity number. An even simpler method rates probability and damage as high, medium, or low, plotting them on a risk matrix or heat map, where high sits in the danger corner and low barely registers. A richer method rates each threat on 5 questions: damage, reproducibility, exploitability, affected users, and discoverability, to gauge its real seriousness. Once ranked, you choose responses weighted by cost and effectiveness, adjusting architecture, operations, and defenses. Think of triage in an emergency room, treating the most dangerous cases before the minor ones. So let's bring it together. Threat modeling identifies, categorizes, and analyzes threats across a system's whole life. You do it proactively in design and reactively through threat hunting after deployment. You identify threats by focusing on assets, attackers, or software, and you categorize them with Stride and fuller methodologies. You diagram the system, decompose it to expose trust boundaries and data flows, and then prioritize with methods like probability times damage, a risk matrix, or the 5-question rating. Model early and rank ruthlessly, and you spend your effort exactly where the danger is greatest. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to section 1.8. This is the 10th session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. In this session, we'll extend risk thinking out to everyone who builds your technology. We'll answer several questions. What is a supply chain, and what is supply chain risk management? How does the supply chain become a threat vector? What do supply chain attacks look like? How do you assess and monitor that risk? And what mechanisms help you secure it? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because your security is only as strong as the weakest hand your gear passed through. Picture a company that buys sleek network appliances from a trusted brand. Never realizing a subcontractor 3 tiers down slipped in an extra chip, the device works perfectly, yet quietly leaks data. Trace and vet the chain, and you catch that risk before it ships. On the job, this is how you defend against attacks that arrive pre-installed. What is a supply chain, and what is supply chain risk management? A supply chain is the long, layered history behind any finished product. Almost no computer or device is built by a single company. Final assembly sits on top of processors, memory, drives, and boards from separate vendors, who in turn depend on others for metals, plastics, and silicon. Supply chain risk management, or SCRM, is the practice of making sure every link is reliable, trustworthy, and open about its security. You should evaluate it for every product and service you acquire from outside suppliers. Think of tracing every ingredient in a packaged meal back to its farm. The final dish is only as safe as its sources. Why must each link be accountable to the next? Because trust has to be enforced at every handoff, not assumed. Each link should be responsible to the one after it, with handoffs organized, documented, managed, and audited. The goal is a finished product that meets quality and performance targets, carries its promised security, and was never tampered with or sabotaged anywhere along the way. Think of a sign chain of custody for evidence. Every person who touches it signs, so any break is visible. How does the supply chain become a threat vector? It becomes one when a supposedly trusted source is quietly compromised upstream. You obtain materials, software, hardware, or data believing they are clean, but the chain behind that source may have been poisoned or modified. This is also why you weigh external factors like a supplier's stability and resource availability. Ask hard questions about delivery models too. If you run just in time, with parts arriving exactly when needed, do you hold any buffer stock to keep producing if a shipment is delayed? Think of a river feeding a town. If someone contaminates it far upstream, every tap downstream is affected. What do supply chain attacks actually look like? They take a few recognizable forms. Attackers can tamper with a product, substitute counterfeits, or embed hidden implants that add remote access or listening capabilities to otherwise normal equipment. In the modern era, this reaches into the AI supply chain too, where third-party models, poison training data, and vulnerable plugins introduce fresh risks that deserve the same scrutiny as hardware and software. These attacks are genuinely hard to catch, because miniaturization can hide an extra chip, and the manipulation may live in firmware or software rather than the hardware you can see. Think of a counterfeit part slipped into a machine. It looks identical, but it betrays you from the inside. How do you assess and monitor supply chain risk? Through ongoing oversight and firm minimum requirements. Monitoring, management, and assessment may be demanded by best practice or regulation, performed by you or by external auditors. And here is a crucial test. Any partner who cannot run their own operations securely cannot be trusted to secure part of your chain. Wherever possible, set minimum security requirements for each entity, meeting or exceeding what the final product needs, and back them with detailed review of contracts and service level agreements. When a provider builds software or delivers a service, you may define a service level requirement upfront that the final agreement must honor. Think of vetting every subcontractor on a build to the same code the general contractor must meet. What mechanisms help you secure the supply chain? 3 technical building blocks come up often, and not all fit every organization. First is a silicon root of trust, a tamper-resistant hardware component that gives a system a secure starting point, verifying the boot process and providing built-in cryptographic operations and remote attestation. Second is a physically unclonable function, which generates a unique hardware fingerprint from a chip's inherent physical properties, useful for authentication and for exposing counterfeits or implants. Third is a software bill of materials, a full inventory of every software component and dependency, with versions and sources so teams can track origins and patch known vulnerabilities fast. Think of a sealed foundation stone, a unique fingerprint, and a complete parts list, together proving a product is genuine and traceable. So let's bring it together. A supply chain is the long history behind every product, and supply chain risk management keeps each link reliable and accountable to the next. That chain can become a threat vector when an upstream source is compromised, and attacks take the form of tampering, counterfeits, and hidden implants, now including the AI supply chain. You defend with ongoing monitoring, minimum security requirements, and service level requirements, plus 3 mechanisms: a silicon root of trust, physically unclonable functions, and a software bill of materials. Secure the whole chain, and you close a door most attackers count on you leaving open. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session.